My blade is ready. Hoshimi Miyabi, here to support. Swift and decisive! Cha! Leave it to me. Huh.
Subscribe!
Hey guys, MrPokke here, back with another video, and on today's episode of Early Access Review, we are going to be taking a look at quite possibly a game-breaking character in Xenozone Zero, Miyabi, right? She has been teased to us ever since the very first CBT, and then she just disappeared from CBT 2 onwards, and now after so long, version 1.4, she is finally going to be released, and oh boy, she does not disappoint, right? So we're going to be taking a look at her kit, her playstyles, her W engines, drive disc, team comps, etc, etc. So without further ado, let's get into today's content. Beware, there's gonna be a lot of Acheron references. So a quick little summary about Miyabi. She is going to be our latest anomaly unit added to the roster, but she has a extremely strong kit as well as base multipliers. Her enhanced basic attack at the highest charge level, which I'm going to talk about later, it literally has a 4,282% multiplier. To put that into context, Alan Joe's ultimate damage multiplier is 3,781. That's right, Miyabi's enhanced basic attack at the highest level of charge literally has a higher multiplier than most DPS units ultimate. That is how strong Miyabi is. In my opinion, she's also very reminiscent of how Acheron changed the balance scale in Honkai Starbucks, right? That is quite literally the level of power we're talking about for Miyabi, and I really don't mean this to like glaze or whatever, right? The amount of damage that this unit does is quite frankly ridiculous, right? So her kit basically revolves around building up your Fallen Frost, very similar to how Acheron builds up your Slash Dream in order to use Acheron's ultimate. And Miyabi is basically gonna be building up to 6 stacks of Fallen Frost, and then you will let go of her enhanced base attack to deal the absolutely diabolical 4,000 multiplier attack, right? So that is the gist of Miyabi's kit. There's a lot of tags, especially for a core skill, but it can be basically broken down to get 6 stacks of Fallen Frost, deal big damage, and you swap back to your other unit, and you kind of repeat the process over again. And there's a couple of intricate details here and there, like increasing your frost burn, increasing your anomaly build up, increasing your ice rest rate. But that's just all of the additional gaming stuff. As long as you understand that you build up 6 stacks, let go of enhanced basic, you swap out. That is pretty much it for Miyabi's summary kit. So very easy to understand, very easy to use, and just deals an overall absurd amount of damage from her base character kit, right? So let's just jump straight into Miyabi's character kit, and I'm gonna start everything off with her core skill because that is kind of the whole gist of how Miyabi's kit tied together. It is a lot of words, but it can be basically summarized to these following points, right? So the first things first, for the core talent. So the first part is, whenever she deals any frost damage, she will apply ice fire to the target, lasting 30 seconds. If you accumulate any frost anomaly build-up against targets with ice fire, you will increase the frost build-up rate by 100% of her crit rate, up to a maximum of 80%. So the very first thing is, you want to hit very high crit rate with Miyabi, and this can be quite easily achieved, especially if you build her as a normal crit DPS. So even though she's anomaly, she basically plays like a crit DPS, somewhat similar to how like Acheron's Annihility, but she plays like a crit DPS, right? So up to an additional 80% frost anomaly build up from the crit rate itself. And as we accumulate this frost anomaly build-up, it has an independent attribute anomaly, and it will trigger freeze, shatter, frostbite that will interact with any other attribute anomalies, including the ice anomaly. So if you were to run her with another ice team, she will still be able to trigger disorder. So because they're kind of like 2 separate effects, right? But most of the time, I'm going to talk about this in the team's building section. You are probably not going to be running Miyabi with ice because she's going to be performing much better with units like Yanagi, right? So when we apply frostbite to the enemies with ice fire, it will consume ice fire to trigger frost burn break, dealing a 1,500% multiplier for attack and causing the target to enter into the frost burn state. And all squad members at this point will accumulate 20% more anomaly build up against a target with the frostburn state. However, we cannot reapply ice fire to these enemies when you already break them, right? So this is also going to be tied into her gameplay loop. Once you enter into Frostburn state, your other anomaly attributes, such as your Disorder Break from Yanagi, or even your Burn Anomaly Blood from Bernice, they will be applied at a 20% faster pace. And then this Frostburn state will end when Frostbite expires. And when every single time we trigger a Frostburn break, Miyabi will gain 1 point of Fallen Frost, which is going to be the little dot that you see at the top left-hand corner, right? Keep in mind that the Frostburn break, where you get 1 point of Fallen Frost, it does come with an inherent 10-second cooldown, so just something to keep in mind. On top of that, you can kind of see that the rotation for Miyabi in order to apply the highest number of Fallen Frost is not going to be via herself. Because by Miyabi herself, she can only gain Fallen Frost from either the ultimate or the EX skill. So you would need the help of your other teammates to help us generate more Fallen Frost stacks, especially via Disorder, in order to get these 6 stacks as frequently as possible. And the additional ability is that as long as another unit in your squad is a support character, you will deal additional 60% basic attack damage, and if any squad member triggers Disorder, you'll gain 2 points of Fallen Frost. And the next enhanced base attack, so this is the charging attack, it will ignore 30% of the target's ice rest. So this is very, very easily triggered with either a support or the same faction, so most of the time, you are going to be running her with either Yanagi, you can run her with a Lucy. As long as this ability is triggered, she's going to be dealing a lot more damage, and you should always be triggering this with Miyabi, right? So to sum it up at this point, additional 1500% damage multiplier, 20% more attribute anomaly build up, 30% ignore ice damage rest, 60% base attack damage buff, and then you apply 1 point of Fallen Frost every Frostburn break, as well as 2 points per Disorder, right? So that is the gist of her core skill, and it will be very important with regards to her total damage output when we go back into this basic attack. So for a basic attack, you are actually not that relying on the whole basic attack chain, because you are going to be relying on the enhanced base attack via the Shimosuke stance. Alright, so the Shimosuke stance, if you guys play Monster Hunter, it's kind of like Great Sword charging up for their True Charge Slash. You will charge this up to 3 charges based on the number of stacks you see on the top left hand corner. For every 2 points of Fallen Frost, it's going to be 1 charge. Right, so at the absolute maximum charge, this will be a 4,282% multiplier. And you should always be using this every single scenario. If you are ever using a level 1 charge or a level 2 charge, the damage falls off by a drastic amount, right? So from level 1, it's only going to be at 900%, level 2 is 1.7k, and level 3, it literally almost like triples the original multiplier to 4.2k, right? So always use the maximum charge level 3, and you can in fact do this very easily, because during the charging stage of this Shimosuke stance, you are completely invulnerable. So you are not going to be receiving any damage, you're not going to be knocked out. So players will find it very, very comfy to just let go of this long-winded charge attack to deal a diabolical amount of damage. You can have up to 6 points of Fallen Frost, and you instantly enter into battle with 3 points of Fallen Frost, like in all of your endgame content, which once again reminds me of how Aircron gets up to 6 stacks of slash streams once you enter the battle, right? I'm sorry for the style brain rot, but it is what it is. For her dodge, parry, you're pretty much not going to be using it that much, and I'm just going to jump straight into both her EX special as well as the ultimate. Both her EX special and her ultimate, there are quick ways to build up your Fallen Frost stacks. Your EX special will give you 2 stacks plus 2 stacks, because it's going to be 40 plus 40 energy, because you can consume an extra energy to gain another 2 points of Fallen Frost. And then her ultimate is going to be giving us a 3 stacks of Fallen Frost, as well as increasing ice damage by 30% for 12 seconds, right? One quick little note about Miyabi's ultimate is that because we do have the changes to the decibel system, in which you can actually activate ultimates from all of your units now instead of just 1 DPS, you would likely want to save Miyabi's ultimate for after the buffs and debuffs from the team. So for example, if you're going to be using Lucy, or if you're going to be using Lighter, which both of them has a considerable amount of buff and debuff, you will want to use their ultimates first, and then use Miyabi's ultimate after them to do the absolute highest amount of damage. And after using Miyabi's ultimate, you get the additional 3 stacks, you let go of all of your enhanced attacks, let go of your enhanced multipliers, and then you can then swap back into other units to continue the damage output. Ideally, you would also want to try to stack this during the enemy day stage, because then you will deal a lot more damage during the stun multiplier higher increase, right? So that's going to be that. So these are the ways that you can accumulate Fallen Frost with Miyabi, right? 1 point via triggering a Frostburn break, 2 point via Disorder, 2 point via EX skill, and then another 2 point if you do another EX skill, 3 points via Ultimate. Unless you unlock Miyabi's Mindscape 2, which means you can now build on more stacks from just her base attack, but I'm going to talk about that a little bit in the Mindscape section, right? So this will be quite important to understanding how can we quickly maximize our 6 stacks of Fallen Frost as fast as possible in order to access this extremely strong enhanced base attack from Shimosuke stance, right? So in terms of ordering priority for Miyabi, you are going to be leveling up her core skill, absolutely, and then followed by your base attack, because the base attack levels will be directly tied to your enhanced base attack, especially the 3 charge multiplier, right? So absolutely level your basic first, and then followed by your ultimate, followed by your EX skill, and then your dodge and parries, they are basically not that relevant, right? So that's it. That is basically it for Miyabi's entire character kit. So for example, if you're going to be starting a battle with Miyabi and Yanagi, you want to do your EX special because you start off, you'll get 6 stacks, let go of this 6 stacks, swap back into Yanagi because at this point you have applied your Ice Fire, the normal build rate is going to increase, you can trigger your Frostburn break, and then Yanagi is going to swap back here and there, and then once Yanagi does her thing, you can then swap back into Miyabi because she will gain additional Fallen Frost stacks from the Disorder trigger, and everything just kind of repeats itself. So Miyabi is not really a on-field DPS. She is somewhat like a burst DPS because her on-field time when she's out of energy as well as out of the ultimate, she doesn't really apply a lot of Fallen Frost by herself unless you get her Mindscape 2, right? You can think of her as somewhat like a swap unit to work seamlessly with Yanagi because Yanagi also doesn't really have a extremely high field time because once you let go of her EX special, you can kind of just swap back to Miyabi, which is why these two are just working very similarly to one another, which I'll be talking about a little bit more in the team comp section. So let's just jump straight into Miyabi's signature W engine as well as the W engine recommendations. Hailstorm Shrine signature W engine. Crit damage increased by 50%, and when using an EX special or when any squad members applies an attribute anomaly, it quivers ice damage increase of 20% up to 2 times and lasting 15 seconds. This is the only W engine right now we have in the entire game that offers an anomaly unit with crit values because the main stat is actually 24% crit rate. So via the W engine alone, you get 24% crit rate, 50% crit damage, and 40% ice damage. And no other anomaly W engine we have in the game right now can offer this amount of crit value to Miyabi. And like I mentioned, Miyabi is very similar to Aircron. She doesn't care about the anomaly damage, she only cares about the crit values, right? Which is why a Miyabi without W engine is gonna be vastly different compared to a Miyabi with W engine. I would say that if there is a single DPS unit in Xenosaga Zero right now that really wants that W engine, it is going to be Miyabi because her secondary alternatives, they fall behind by a very large margin, right? So just purely because of the fact that we don't have a very good substitute, this W engine is going to be extremely important, and I would say that getting Miyabi with a W engine would be an extremely combo choice and has a far more importance compared to getting her Mindscape one, right? So extremely strong W engine. If you do not get this W engine, you can think about other alternatives such as Bernice W engine, the Roaring Ride or Fusion Compiler like Grace W engine, but just know that all of these different W engines, they really pale in comparison compared to Miyabi's W engine, right? So for example, if you are going to be running her with Bernice W engine, you could run this quite nicely since she does have a pretty nice energy regeneration off field, which means that you can trigger more of Miyabi's EX special when she's actually on field, right? But this is also provided you actually get Bernice's signature engine. And then if you are going to be using this with, for example, a Grace W engine, if you really do have any other choice, then a little bit of a anomaly efficiency is not going to be that bad, but it is just a huge downgrade, right? So essentially, Miyabi's W engine is going to be extremely important for her kit. Not a must, I would say, but she performs a lot better with it. Okay, as you can see over here, I also took the liberty of putting up a little bit of numbers done by the CN community. You can see that the comparison between Miyabi's W engine to all of the alternatives, namely your S5 Lip Gloss, which is a Battle Pass engine, to all of the other like Grace signature, it's pretty much more than a 20% upgrade for almost everything. If you're going to be using Roaring, right, it's going to be a 30% increase in upgrade, right? So that is the benchmark for comparison if you're thinking about your alternatives for Miyabi. So with the W engine out the way, let's just talk about Miyabi's drive disc. Her drive disc is honestly very straightforward because in version 1.4, Xenosaga Zero has pretty much released a dedicated drive disc, just like how, you know, in Honkai Starbucks, they released a dedicated weapon set for Aircron. The brand new 4-piece branch and blade, 16% crit damage at 2 piece, and And 4-piece, if your anomaly mastery exceeds or equals to 115, Equiper's crit damage increased by 30%. And if any squad members applies freeze or triggers shatter, the Equiper's crit rate increased by another 12%, lasting 15 seconds. And this is obviously going to apply with our Miyabi's unique ability for triggering her Frostburn. So it is the perfect signature set for Miyabi. So you don't need to pre-farm for Miyabi's drive this. The moment this set drops, you can pretty much just dump all of your batteries and just go ham for this, because the alternative 2-piece is also going to be at the same place, right? Because the other 2-piece is going to be 2-piece attack, which works perfectly with Miyabi's kit itself. If you have a exceptionally good Allen set for your 4-piece ice, you could technically give this to Miyabi if you choose to just not dump any additional stamina. But just know that this brand new 4-piece is absolutely the best in slot for Miyabi, right? So that's going to be there. For our 2-piece, honestly, very, very flexible. You can run 2-piece attack. So any of the 2-piece attack, 2-piece pen ratio, 2-piece ice damage, or even 2-piece crit rate. For 2-piece crit rate, it is not that recommended, especially if you pull for the W engine. But if you are having issues hitting the 80% crit rate, then it is going to be quite recommended to get the 2-piece crit rate, right? So that is going to be there for the drive this portion. And then for the main stats, for your slot 4, it is pretty much always going to be either crit rate or crit damage, depending on subsets. And then for slot 5, it's either going to be pen ratio or your ice damage percentage. And then finally for slot 6, you can either go for attack percentage or anomaly mastery, right? So me personally, I think I just like a little bit more of the anomaly mastery to trigger it a little bit faster, especially since if you do have the W engine, you want to hit that 115 mastery as well. So that's going to be that for the main sets. And for the subsets, it's pretty much going to be the same for all of your crit DPS, right? Your crit rate, crit damage, attack percentage, pen ratio, nothing too much to talk about over there. So a little bit of a fun fact, if you do have Miyabi's W engine, you need 7 crit rate subsets in order to achieve the efficiency for your core passive. But if you do not have Miyabi's signature W engine, you will need 17 crit rate subsets. So that is how much value you're getting out of Miyabi's W engine in order to fully utilize her core passive. So just something to consider. That being said, you can alleviate this if you run a 2-piece crit rate, then you only need 13 crit rate subsets. Okay, moving on to Miyabi's Mindscapes, and I am so sorry for once again making this comparison, but she really just reminds me so much of Aircraft. She is gonna be getting a game-changing Mindscape at Mindscape 2, and Mindscape 6 is just diabolical damage, right? So that is essentially what we can take away from Miyabi's Mindscape. Her Mindscape 1, every 1 point of Fallen Frost is 6% defense ignore, so basically 6 points is going to be 36% defense ignore. And if you were to hit a level 3 charge of your enhanced basic against an enemy under Frostburn, it will immediately remove Frostburn and increase our entire squad members' anomaly build rate by 20% for 10 seconds. The main point is the 36% defense ignore, so that is going to be a pretty considerable damage buff, especially if you were to pair with a unit like Nicole, which can apply a 45% defense down via her core passive, right? But frankly speaking, not that game-changing of a Mindscape, because her Mindscape 2, it really does change everything. Because now, with her Mindscape 2, your basic attack and dodge counter damage increased by 30%, but on top of that, you gain 1 point of Fallen Frost whenever the final hit of your 5th basic attack hits the target. Which means Miyabi now has a much faster build-up rate for your Fallen Frost, just like how E2 Aircraft allows her to get a much faster charge for your slash dreams. I'm so sorry for making this comparison, but she really just does remind me of Aircraft, right? So you also immediately gain 6 points of Fallen Frost when you enter the combat, and your crit rate increases by 15%. Which means her rotations feels a lot smoother, a lot faster, deals a lot more damage, and it is now much easier to build Miyabi with the additional 15% crit rate. So Mindscape 2 is truly the game-changing Mindscape for Miyabi, and if you are not going to be getting the Mindscape 2, then frankly speaking, Mindscape 1 is not that impressive, even though it is a pretty considerable 36% defense ignore. Between Mindscape 1, 2, as well as her W engine, it is still highly recommended to get Miyabi's W engine first before considering any of her Mindscape, right? So that's going to be that. Then for a Mindscape 4, increase your Frostburn break damage by 30%, as well as gaining 250% more decibels upon triggering Frostburn break. So just to increase our rotation for Ultimate a little bit more, the 30% break damage, frankly speaking, is not that important. Okay, and finally for Miyabi's Mindscape 6 Proteus talent, you can essentially think of this as your E6 Aircron, because during your stance, you will gain Polar, which first increases your base hit damage by 30% raw, and after you obtain Polar, you will draw her blade and unleash powerful slashes based on the current charge. Which means you essentially duplicate your level 3 charge again. And each occurrence of your stuns can perform up to 3 draws and slashes. So I don't really think I need to emphasize how strong this is, because every single one of your level 3 charge is a 4,200% multiplier, right? So if you guys are going to be going for the highest possible damage in the entire game, then E6 Miyabi is pretty much going to be it, right? So that's going to be for Miyabi's Mindscapes. And now finally we can jump into Miyabi's team comms, playstyle, etc, etc, right? So to kind of summarize up her team comms as well as her combat controls, how do you actually play her? Her gameplay loop, like I mentioned at the start of the video, is very, very simple. You want to trigger your disorders, as well as expanding on Miyabi's EX special skill, as well as ultimate, to build up your Fallen Frost and trigger as many of these 6 stacks Fallen Frost as much as possible to deal the highest number of 4,200% multiplier every single time, right? After you deal your Frostburn break damage, you want to switch to buff your teammates and trigger other anomaly states. And then once you're done, you can then switch back into Miyabi for the next round of damage. So this Miyabi's damage ceiling, because of the way this works, is extremely high, and right now it is not where Miyabi's damage is going to be kept. Very similar to how Aircron's damage goes up tremendously with the introduction of a support like Jiaoqiu. So for now, Miyabi does have an extremely strong Yanagi, but we are still missing that third support that can truly unlock Miyabi's potential. So stay tuned to the future to see what Xenozone Zero has in store for us for Miyabi, right? So that's gonna be that. It is worth noting that if you were to be dealing damage with our Miyabi's third charge slash, you can also switch into other squad members to perform other moves. So for example, if you're gonna be using the Yanagi, you can actually switch to Yanagi after Miyabi draws a blade during the level 3 charge slash. And if you were to hold EX special 1 or 2 times, you can trigger your polarity disorder from Yanagi. And then your Miyabi's level 3 charge slash would have just released, and you would have gained 4 points of Fallen Frost, which means she can immediately perform another level 3 charge slash after casting 1 EX special. So this is gonna be a pretty interesting combo, but you do need pretty good timing to master this combination. One thing to keep in mind as well for her playstyle is that when Miyabi uses her ultimate while she's charging a combo, it will actually interrupt her status and it will reduce the damage dealt. So it is definitely recommended to switch to another team member to use the ultimate while Miyabi is charging her own combo move, right? So when she's charging, it is basically like Watering Waves. You can just quick yourself to another DPS unit, right? So that is going to be that. And now we can finally talk about Miyabi's team comps. So from all the testing so far, Yanagi definitely is going to be the absolute highest damage ceiling that we're going to be getting with Miyabi. They synergize with each other perfectly. They both don't really need that much field time individually, because for Miyabi, once you run out of Fallen Frost decks, you're not going to be using her on field unless you have a M2 Miyabi. So no more energy, no more ultimate, you swap it to Yanagi. Yanagi triggers the polarity disorder, triggers all of her stuff, hold your EX skill, and then once Yanagi does her stuff, you can just swap back into Miyabi, because by then you would have triggered your disorder, gained more Fallen Frost decks, and then you kind of just repeat the whole cycle all over again, right? So Yanagi is definitely going to be an exceptional support, or rather exceptional slot 2 for Miyabi in the team comp. So this chart perfectly demonstrates the rotation between Miyabi and Yanagi. Credits to the CN content creators, but I'm just going to yoink this real quick. So to roughly translate, the first box is going to be with Yanagi, the second box is going to be with Miyabi, right? So you will open up the battle with Miyabi, basic into a EX special, and then once you get an EX special, you would have gotten 6 stacks of Fallen Frost, and then you will let go of this enhanced base tech. And like I mentioned at the start just now, you can in fact weave in Yanagi at this point, because during the charge, you can actually swap into another DPS. So during this charge, you swap back into Yanagi, trigger your disorder, and then you'll get another 4 stacks for Miyabi, right? Because of the disorder +2, you'll get another 4 stacks, and then you swap back into Miyabi for the enhanced EX special again to get another 6 stacks for an extremely strong burst of damage, right? So between this time, you can kind of also see the number of Fallen Frost at the bottom, right? So once 2 level 3 enhanced base attack charges has been released, you can then swap back your Yanagi to do the Yanagi things. But unfortunately, at this point, Miyabi is going to run out of your EX special energy, so you're going to be using Yanagi for a while, and then once Yanagi does the stuff, you then swap back to Miyabi, and then the cycle kind of repeats itself. So this is going to be a rough timeline of how you would be using Yanagi and Miyabi for pretty much the highest damage possible in Xenozone Zero as of this current moment. For your slot 3, the most comfortable slot 3 right now is still going to be Caesar King, just because of the anti-interrupt, the shield, the quality of life, the damage increase, the red down. So Caesar is definitely going to be a very general slot 3, but in my opinion, there might probably be a even stronger slot tree for Miyabi going forward that can give us even more Fallen Frost decks, give us even more damage buff on top of Caesar's survivability and comfort, right? So that is going to be up to the future. And then for other alternative teammates, I've noticed that for Lighter and Lucy, it's also a very, very strong combination for Miyabi, especially for players that actually did not pull for Yanagi and actually went for Lighter, right? So one thing to know is that if you are going to be running Lighter, you absolutely must run Lucy, because otherwise you will not trigger Miyabi's passive, because you need a support character or the character from the same squad, right? So this squad will rely on somewhat of like a burst where you will break the enemies very quickly with Lighter, apply your buffs with Lucy, and then you swap back into Miyabi to deal the damage needed, right? The downside to this team is that you will stack on your Fallen Frost at a slower pace compared to Yanagi, but the burst damage you're going to be dealing, as well as the number of time you're breaking the enemy, is going to be a lot higher. So a little bit of trade-off here and there, but I would say that you're still going to be getting a pretty decent 2-ish minute clear on our current endgame content, so not too much to worry about if you really do not have Yanagi. And another playstyle is going to be with Bernice. Bernice is another way that we can trigger on our disorder, because she's going to be a all-field pyro DPS, right? You can apply our afterburn, off-field, and that kind of stuff, but the downside to this comp is that Bernice, being an off-field DPS, Miyabi is also kind of like a swap DPS. She doesn't really have a lot of field time, so both of them are units that don't really want to stay on field that long, especially when you run out of energy for both units. So it kind of just boils back down to the point where Yanagi is pretty much the only unit that can synergize with Miyabi's downtime. Other teammates that can kind of get an honorable mention. Worst team so far I found Miyabi is probably going to be the Ice team. They just don't really have that much synergy, even though they are mono Ice. We get a little bit of Ice res down, but because we don't trigger our disorder fast enough compared to units like Yanagi, it is simply going to be pretty much the worst. One interesting little thing to note is that with a Yanagi, Nicole, and Miyabi team, I noticed is that by using Nicole's her enhanced skill, by pressing and holding, you almost instantly build up the anomaly gauge for the ether element. And that led to some pretty interesting testings, especially considering Nicole herself, she does have this AoE grouping, which is one down point of Miyabi. One of the cons is she doesn't really group that well. And it also comes with a 45% defense down. So pretty interesting combo you guys want to try out yourselves. And then other different combinations like your Rina plus Sokaku or Lucy, so that's going to be a support slot, plus another anomaly slot like Jane Doe, Grace, or even like Piper. It is fine, but the stacks, or rather the speed in which you're triggering this order, is going to be way slower compared to Yanagi, or even the day speed of like Lighter. So it's just going to be a lot less comfortable. So at this point, kind of summarize, Miyabi's current best in slot team comp is going to be with Yanagi plus Caesar. In the future, Caesar is probably going to be replaced by another support. If you do not have Yanagi, running Lighter plus Lucy is also a pretty decent alternative, especially for players that did pull for Lighter, on top of the, considering Lighter's very high amount of buffs, as well as the Ice Red Shirt we are getting from his kit, right? So that's going to be that. So with that, we'll come to the end of Miyabi's early access review, and once again, I do want to apologize for the number of times I'm referencing Miyabi to Akrons. Hope you guys have fun with her when she releases in a live server, because she is extremely, extremely strong. And once again, I'm so sorry for the number of Akron references, because I cannot dissociate myself from looking at Miyabi like Akron. They're just so similar. They're both game-changing. They're both like crit anomaly, crit nihility, and they both build up stacks. It's just too much similarity, and they both have a diabolical E2 or M2. Very, very strong signature, like going to our signature W engine. So it is what it is. Word of the day is gonna be broken, because she's absolutely bastard. 4,200%. Are you kidding? Alright, so join Twitch, join YouTube, join Discord, join Twitter, all the best for a gacha post. I'll see you guys next time. Take care.